Welcome into the Fade NCAA Tournament Edition. We may well do this for the Sweet 16 next week as well. We are joined by Kelly Stewart, a.k.a. at Kelly in Vegas. I, of course, am Clay Travis, the greatest gambler who has ever lived in the history of mankind. I'm going to be betting on every single first-round game, which is going to drive Kelly crazy, much like it drove Todd Furman crazy. I've got 16 picks up right now. There will be 16 picks up tomorrow for Friday's games. Kelly, I've done this for a bunch of years. One of the years that I did this, you ended up passed out in my suite, along with many other people, by the way, sleeping on couch cushions. Will you confirm that in fact occurred after Todd Furman, who also was passed out, demanded that you sleep on the couch cushions on the ground and threw them to you down there?
So let's give a little background history. We were filming for FS1. We had all just met each other. I'd already previously known Todd. Andy Roddick, the tennis player, was there. A couple other gambling
tennis
personalities
star, Andy
were there.
Roddick.
Yeah. And, we had decided we were going to go to a nightclub, but next thing you know, we end up at the Grand Lux Cafe in Venetian, and you, and I'm assuming at the time he was a PA, were chugging Mai Tais, and we were racing each other on who could drink Mai Tais the fastest out of a straw.
Yes, this is true.
And then things got a little fuzzy, and this was before like Uber was a big thing. Like it was like you left your car on the strip, you better hope you have a friend that could take you back, because the taxis are not coming to the west side of Las Vegas to get you and take you back for anything less than $100. So I was like, all right, Todd, who's driving? And he's like, nobody's driving. We're staying with Clay. I'm staying with Clay. We can't stay with Clay. Anyway, Todd threw me a bathrobe.
We had a full suite.
Yeah, it was not my brightest moment.
Drunk people. You also came to do you remember when I invited all the OutKick VIPs up to my room? Didn't you come to the room then too, when I had like 50 strangers in my suite in Vegas? Yes.
That was also really fun. You had I would call it like a meet and greet, right? But you had people come to your room instead of like a bar, and then we were all just up there drinking. Somebody was tweeting pictures about that. I think today I saw something, but I couldn't remember when it was from.
I think it was from so people, by the way, who think that I'm a diva in any way, I think I have the lowest diva category tendencies maybe ever. I invited everyone. No, I didn't know most of them at all. I don't think I knew any of them.
No.
I said, if you're an OutKick VIP, I'm going to post on the OutKick VIP message board. We will meet. We had multiple meetups, but this one in particular, I met everybody in the Palazzo lobby. I went and bought alcohol for everyone in the Palazzo gift shop, and then I brought them all up to my room. I think it was like 50 people, strangers. You were there. We did a live OutKick gambling special, like on Periscope, from my hotel suite. Yes. And I don't know, it's probably like 7 or 8 years ago. And everybody just sat around and talked, and we gambled. So all of these things happened. I also think, what did I offer you to jump in the fountain at the in between the Palazzo and the Venetian? Do you remember that?
So you were talking on your show that I was listening in before we started this show, and you were talking about how you have highs and lows in your life. Why are you bringing up all the lows in my life? You probably gave me like $100.
What was the dollar figure that you were willing to do?
It was probably like $100. Like, how embarrassing! I know for a fact that I also jumped in the top golf pool for $200 at one point in time. Listen, desperate times call for desperate measures.
That's an actual pool. That's an actual pool.
Yeah, but it was January in Vegas. It was freezing.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was January, because I will say this about the Grand Lux. I don't even know if they still have them both. They had, at this time, they had a Grand Lux Cafe, which, by the way, I love the Grand Lux Cafe. I like the chicken parmesan. This is like the I don't know if it's a higher end Cheesecake Factory or a lower end.
Yes.
Do you know?
No, it's
the Grand
like
Lux
a
higher
Factory.
or lower?
I would say it's
the
higher.
Same company, I think. Yeah, okay, higher level than the Cheesecake Factory. Not a lot. They had a Grand Lux, I think they still do, in the Palazzo, but it closes at like 11 o'clock. And then they have a Grand Lux, I think, that never closes in the Venetian. So we walked from the Palazzo.
24 hours.
Yeah, I think it's 24. I don't think it ever closes. And so we had everybody that did television, basically, except I don't want to get him in trouble, except Andy Roddick went back, and he was with Brooklyn Decker, and he was not with us at the Grand Lux Cafe at 4 a.m. We had everybody that basically put on the Fox television show. All the PAs, all the production assistants, for people who don't know, all the producers, everybody doing, what was it, like Mai Tai chugging contests at 4 a.m. in the Venetian?
All I know is that I was like, all right, we're going to eat, we're going to go home, and next thing I know, there are literal 21-year-olds, which, I mean, I felt older than them, so that's why I say that. I felt like they were fresh out of college.
The PAs, not strange 21-year-olds that I just brought with us. They were like just graduated college 21-year-old PAs.
And they're like, I can chug, I can do this. And Clay's just like barely chugging and just demolishing these kids. Like out of a straw.
I'm an old man. I've got old out of a straw. I was able to demolish all the younger kids. But don't drink, kids. But if you do, then Kelly will dive into a fountain in the, I guess that would have been the Venetian Palazzo shops. But we didn't do it. But I think it was only, I think you're right. I think it was only like $100. All right. All of that is prelude to say you and I are Vegas gambling experts based on all of that. So what do you love other than the fact that, let me just say this, last year at the NCAA tournament, I was with you and Ariel and several OutKick guys, with Hudden and Withrow. We were in Madison Square Garden. And your Aunt Helen, who I love, she's fabulous, watching the Sweet 16 games there. Your beloved Kansas State Wildcats, they won. Who did they beat in the Sweet 16?
They beat Michigan State.
Yeah, that's right. And then my Tennessee Volunteers choked, as they always do, to FAU and ruined my entire weekend in New York City. And then all you had to do, Kelly, was beat FAU, and your favorite team would have been in the Final Four. They lost, and now they can't even win an NIT game. What's your state of the program for Kansas State right now?
You know, I'm going to say this much. I heard you talking about Tony Bennett on your other show, and I think he's a prime example of coaches not adapting to the new environment. And I think Coach Tang and his staff have done a really good job, considering the first year they got almost three NBA players. He ended up not playing in the NBA, but I think he's in the G League, out of the transfer portal. So that's what I'm expecting from them. Hopefully they can retain a couple of the guys that had actually shown that they want to play. I'll say this much. Some of the in-game adjustments were not there. They were frustrating. This team turns the ball over a ton. They make some bonehead mistakes, some ticky-tack fouls. Those are things you want to see from a coaching staff progressively get better, not worse. And those were things that just didn't happen. But I'm going to say this, full disclosure, we would not be having this conversation. K-State would be in the big dance had the university president not interfered with what the county had already decided, the coaching staff and the athletic department had already decided in regards to Naquan Tomlin. He ultimately left the program 2 days after graduation and played for Memphis the rest of the season. So that was like the first issue. The second one, Quest Glover, was a transfer. He was banged up all year long. So Tyler Perry was forced to fill in the point guard position, which if you follow Big 12 basketball, he transferred from North Texas. He is a shooting guard. So when you're kind of asked to play out of position, I think that kind of throws a wrench into a lot of things. Would I have liked to have seen them do better with some of that adversity? Absolutely. Sometimes it's just not in the cards.
That's all really very serious. Tony Bennett.
Sorry.
What is this? Yeah, thanks for bringing it down. I need a Mai Tai to pound right now. Tony Bennett. What's your standard? If Kansas State won a national championship, because I think it's a good question. I was talking about this. If Rick Barnes or any coach at Tennessee won a basketball national championship, how many years, no matter what the outcome is, and I'm not talking about like the coach commits a crime or there's some sort of serious felony, but just like normal seasons, how many years would you be willing to give a coach at Kansas State who won a national championship in basketball? What should be the standard? Because people are like, oh, Virginia's awful. They looked like a disaster last night. Yeah, or just how many years does a national championship to you guarantee a coach? If they do it, I'm not talking about doing it at Duke or Kansas or Kentucky, places where they expect a championship every year, kind of. I'm talking about a place where UVA, I wouldn't have put on the top 20 most likely schools to win a national championship in 2000. If you had like said, hey, what are the next 20 champions going to be? I wouldn't have put UVA on that list.
I would agree, especially after they lost in the first round the year prior to come back and win a national championship. That's pretty embarrassing, and that's a tough hump to get over. We'll see if Purdue can do it this year. Here's my thoughts on Tony Bennett and any other coach, for that matter, that is not at one of the blue blood schools that you just mentioned. I'd say 7 years. There's a statute of limitations here. And it also depends on what subsequently happens after that, right? If you win a national championship and then next year you don't make the tournament, and then the following year you make the Elite Eight, and then the next year you make the Sweet 16, and then you make a run for the Final Four. Right. Those are lots different conversations than now you just don't ever make the tournament again, right? And did UVA deserve to get in? No, absolutely not. Did they absolutely embarrass themselves and the committee, as far as I'm concerned, last night? Yes, they did. But I do have to kind of wonder, and this is what I always say as somebody who went to a smaller school, who are you going to get that's better? UVA, who are you going to get that's better than Tony Bennett? I can't think of one coach right now that you're going to get that is going to improve your chances of winning a national championship. I would like to think he's going to adapt a little bit better. I don't think he did a great job with the transfer portal. And, NIL, the coaches have to start getting involved in the abilities that they are able to. I know that there's some really gray language in what they're actually allowed to do and how that works. But I think the coaches need to just be full on board, right? And that's something that I will say. K-State fans, got a little spoiled the first year. NIT this year is what it is. But I would say Coach Tang probably has 3 years to get back to the big dance and make a decent run before people start coming out, raising hell.
All right, let's go. Let's start with this question. When the brackets come out, do you bet any futures? Do you bet Sweet 16s? Do you bet Final Fours? Do you look at national titles? Because until the brackets come out, I always like to screenshot the expected, national title odds, and then see how they adjust once the brackets come out and everybody sees, okay, how are the matchups looking, everything else. Sort of smart money analyzes it. Sometimes there can be substantial shifts because there's different qualities of teams in different brackets. You do anything on the Sweet 16? Do you do anything on Final Fours? Did you make any future bets once the brackets came out?
So I will circle back on that answer. Let's use Iowa State as a great example, Clay. After they won the Big 12, their odds significantly dropped to win the whole thing. And then guess what? The bracket came out and their odds went right back up because they are in a tough conference or division there in the East. It is a gauntlet. And so naturally, the market's going to sway in that direction because they know how tough that side is. So, no, I did not make any futures bets. I actually do not have a single one for this year. I did not have a team that I loved that I thought was so dominant. But I do a podcast with a bookmaker, my good friend John Murray, and we let the audience decide. And he texts me, goes, Venmo me $500. We're making a futures bet on UConn. And I'm like, why did we let these people vote? Why couldn't they pick Creighton that was like 40-1? Why couldn't they pick something fun? They had to pick a team that was 7-1. Right now, we're looking pretty outside of that gauntlet that is the eastern side of the bracket. But Clay, there's a much better way. If you like a longer shot, what you want to do is you just want to roll over the money lines. And then you can also just stop. If you actually don't like them in the Final Four, instead of betting them, to win the whole thing, you can just stop and you have your money in your pocket. But the rollover bets actually do pay more in the long term, especially in a style of play like March Madness, where things can happen. You can't cash out your futures bet very often if the star player gets hurt, right? And you can just not bet the next game if you're doing it yourself.
Do you fill out a bracket?
So I did fill out a bracket this year. I always say bets over brackets. But what I realized last year was I didn't fill out a bracket. And I think the bracket is important to figure out your narrative and how you want to bet some of these games, right? Unlike you, I did not sprinkle on every game on the board. I understand it's a long tournament, but I also understand that maybe you're a little bit of an action junkie. I, on the other hand, was kind of methodical in my way. I'm also in a survivor pool. And so I said, okay, I need this bracket to also be a tool to use in Survivor, because you can only use a team once and you've got to figure out who you want to save and why. You don't just want to save the 1 seeds. Maybe you want to, use Houston in the Elite 8 because you think they're going to get beat in the Final 4, right? Those are some of the thought processes that I have. So actually filling out a bracket, I spent probably an hour on Sunday night doing it. Like, okay, how do I see each of these regions panning out?
So who did you end up with in your Final 4 in the bracket that you did?
So you're going to give me a lot of grief for this because, and I'm actually going to pull it up because I don't want to misspeak how I did it. But I do have to laugh because I am somewhat of a contrarian, right? If you will. And we all know that. And I am very high on the Big 12 this year. And that is not a bias. Top to bottom, they are the best conference. I thought they should have got 9 teams in instead of 8. I also think the Big East got shafted in theirs. But my Final 4 is BYU coming out of the East, which is really tough. But if BYU's shots are falling, this team can get red hot at the right time. I think they can beat UConn in the Elite 8. I took Baylor out of the West. The West region is very interesting. I don't think North Carolina should have been a 1 seed. I don't think Michigan State should have got in. I already bet against St. Mary's in the first round. I was trying to find somebody. I said, hey, I think Charleston actually might be able to upset Alabama here. So I was looking at this Baylor team going, okay, hypothetically they play, New Mexico, Clemson. Could they beat Arizona, right? That's what I really wanted to see. Can they beat this Arizona team? I think the short answer is yes. And then on the flip side, I did have 1 seed because I think Houston has the easiest region to advance to the Final 4. And then out of the Midwest, I mentioned, why couldn't that audience member vote for Creighton at 40-1? I think Creighton has a really good shot here to make a run. Great seeding on their part. We know KU's banged up. Texas is probably going to get beat by Colorado State. I did bet on your Tennessee Vols round 1, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But it is Rick Barnes in March, so I have them getting beat by Creighton there before the Elite 8. So it's gonna be an interesting one. But BYU, Baylor, Houston, and Creighton is my Final 4.
All right, my Final 4: UConn out of the East, Houston out of the South, 2 chalk ones. Tennessee, because I'm a glutton for punishment, and it's just
Sharp?
like that. Yeah. Tennessee out of the Midwest. That was very funny. If you don't know, Shannon Sharp picked all 1 seeds for men's and all 1 seeds for women, which is hysterical. And then St. Mary's out of the West, because I'm a little bit with you. I think that bracket is the most wide open. Alabama doesn't play any defense. If St. Mary's can get past Grand Canyon, I think they can beat Bama. UNC, I'm not sold on. Arizona, I'm not sold on down the stretch. I think that bracket's the most wide open. So that was my Final 4. All right, let's go into Thursday. You can go see all my picks. Some of them are very funny, meaning there's not a lot of logic behind them. But I do love 4, all right? Here are the 4 that I like the best. South Carolina plus the points, basically the money line against Oregon. Do you have a read on that one? You feel strongly one way or the other?
Yeah, that's one of my very best bets. I bet it right when it came out at a pick'em. I love this South Carolina team, one of the best ATS teams in the country. And you know what I really love about them is they've been good on the road. And we have not seen that from any teams all season long, at least not in the Power 5 conferences. Nobody can seem to get a win, buy a win on the road, except for South Carolina. I think that bodes well for a neutral court. I know Oregon needed to get that Pac-12 championship win. But I'm not buying the hype here with the Ducks. I will say this. Dana Altman has never lost in the first round of the tournament.
That's a good stat. I didn't know that, but I'm on South Carolina. Oakland University against. Yes, that's right. Oakland University against Kentucky. Kelly, Kentucky, much like Alabama, on many levels refuses to play defense. Oakland, I think, will score against them. I think Kentucky might hang 100 on them, by the way. But the over 162.5 in this one. Did you bet on this one? Did you touch it?
I did not touch it, but you're absolutely right. Reed Shepherd starts knocking down some threes. Things could get really out of hand. I have to make some, phone a friends when we're talking about teams out of the Horizon League. I called my buddy Adam. I'm like, what do you know about Oakland? And he proceeds to talk about them for 20 minutes like I'm actually listening. I'll tell you this. I agree with you. Neither one of these teams is playing defense. I want no part of the under. And Oakland, I wouldn't be surprised if they hit the back door. This team makes their free throws down the stretch. And we all know Kentucky plays a lot of physical ball. We'll see if the referees are swallowing their whistles or not, but I agree with you here on the over.
All right, you mentioned Tennessee, St. Peter's. I looked at all this. St. Peter's can't score. Tennessee has a great defense. It's a little bit of a strange thing in terms of Zakai Ziegler's playing against his brother. That's Tennessee's point guard. St. Peter's, we know, pulled off the upset over Kentucky. I don't think Tennessee's going to overlook them. I think Tennessee wins this game by 30. And I know Rick Barnes in March has not been a good betting option, but I took the Vols minus 21.5. What about you?
Yeah, I laid 20.5 early in the week. I got a phone call from a friend that says, hey, this guy I really respect. I said, oh, great. I can't wait to bet on Rick Barnes in March. And he said, that's exactly why you should want to bet on this, Kelly. Buck the narrative. We all know you love being a contrarian. Here's a St. Peter's team that shocked the world a couple of years ago. The casual bettor is going to remember that name, right? They're going to remember that Cinderella team. And unfortunately, this is not the same. This is a well-rested, right? They've almost had a week to kind of, gel together. Rick Barnes got to get his guys ready to play. And you're right. This defense is solid. I think they absolutely could run away with this one for our bets. I hope they do.
All right. And the last one. So I've got 4 that I really like tomorrow. I've got Samford, Buckyball, against Kansas. You mentioned that you like the Big 12. Kansas got major injury issues, has not played well on the road at all. I know it's a road-neutral environment, but I got them plus 8.5. I know the number has come down a bit since then. Are you on this one at all?
So, Clay, when this one came out on Sunday, I was getting, texts from some of the guys I know within the KU. We'll call them the inside. They're other journalists. They're inside the locker room, if you will. I said, hey, what's going on with Hunter? Because immediately people love Samford. Immediately. He's like, Hunter's probably going to be a go. I'm more concerned about Kevin. I said, okay, keep me in the loop. As the number started to tick down 7.5, 7, I thought, all right, maybe he's not. Maybe neither of them are going to play. He sends me a text. He goes, McCullers at practice. He's a go. 6 hours later, Bill Self says he's not a go. I'm like, you know what? You guys have one job. But I luckily did not rush to the window to bet the Jayhawks there. Look, the Jayhawks are going to be happy to squeak out a win. They're not only going to be missing the Big 12 leading scorer in Kevin McCullar. Hunter Dickinson's not 100%. They have no bench, Clay. We're looking at bench minutes from this Jayhawks team. They just don't have it. One of the worst, 23% in the country over there on Ken Palm. I know that Juwan Harris, KJ Adams, somebody's going to have to step up, but we sure as heck didn't see it against Cincinnati. Maybe they didn't care. That could always be an argument. Just wanted to go home, rest up for the big tournament. We'll see. I think they're on upset alert.
All right. What other Thursday games? Those are the 4 that I like that I bet all 16, but if you told me, hey, what are your gold standard to the extent that those exist at all for me, those would be my 4. What else do you like on Thursday outside of those games that I just ran through?
Yeah, I laid it with Duke, money line on Sunday night, minus 105. I think it's minus 1.5 now pretty much across the board. Here's a Washington State team that I've been betting against all season long. And the reason why is because I don't think they're any good. I do not think Kyle Smith's team is any good. Yes, they won some games, but nothing about this team really impressed me. They turn the ball over a ton on defense. They don't make their free throws. And typically those are teams I'm looking to bet against. I know Drake kind of gave Miami a scare last year. They were a really popular underdog, but defensively, this team deserves a little bit more credit. They are going to beat you on the glass. They're going to knock down threes. So I think Drake, even at -1.5 is still worth a play. And then we already talked about South Carolina, and then I laid it with Texas Tech. Clay, I tell you guys all the time, whenever I get the best of the number, I laid 6 on Sunday. This one came down to 4.5. I don't understand all the NC State love. Congratulations. They just played 5 games in 5 days, beat teams named Duke and North Carolina. I don't see it. I love this Texas Tech team. They have been scrappy for a better part of the year, outside of that 3-game losing streak that was just kind of weird when they were missing one of their star players. We'll see. Joe Toussaint is going to surprise a lot of people, I think, in this one. Senior leadership, those are the types of things I'm looking for, as I mentioned. Teams that don't turn the ball over, teams that make their free throws, and D1 experience. Texas Tech has the resume here. Bad number and all. I'm hoping NC State just ends up being that public dog.
All right, Friday. Now, we're taping this Wednesday afternoon, just so everybody knows. It'll probably go up Wednesday evening, so we're not going to talk about whatever games are being played tonight on the play-in front. But here are the games that I like, Kelly, and then I'm curious which ones you like. A&M, Nebraska, over 146.5. A&M is an enigma to bet on in general. They take a lot of tough shots, but they have a lot of guys that one-on-one can get those shots. I think they'll hit some their fair share against Nebraska, which is also a good shooting, well-coached team with Fred Hoiberg. I'm on the over there. You touch it at all?
I did not. Man, this Nebraska team, kudos to them making the tournament. I have had a wrong read on them all year long. A&M, exact same scenario. I think it's just two teams that I want nothing to do with.
Understood. All right. I mentioned earlier Kentucky not being willing to play defense. Alabama steadfastly refuses to play defense. They're traveling all the way out to Spokane. They're going up against Charleston. I love the over 173.5. I was just funny. I was down in Florida for spring break last week, and I was out with my buddy, and we were watching games, the tournament games at the sports bar, and we were making bets. And it was the Alabama game against Florida was the late night Thursday game, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, the last game in the SEC tournament. I said, trust me. He said the numbers all the way out to 183.5, I think, was where Alabama, Florida went off. And I said, I'm telling you, this game is going to go way over that number. He told me that I was an imbecile, but he bet it with me. And it went soaring over the number.
It was
even
never in doubt.
Then, right?
Not for 1 second.
Yeah, I think it was 163.5, and it went over to 180 or whatever. Sorry, I think I may have misspoke there a little bit. Big number. Both teams basically projected to score over 80, and they both did. So I like the over in that one. I'll give you a couple more. You can react, see if you agree with any one. Yale, Auburn. I think Auburn's the team that got screwed the most of anybody in the tournament. They shouldn't have been a 4 seed. They're number 5, I think, in the net, 4 in KenPom. Yale was very fortunate to get past Brown. Last second shot, big comeback. I think Yale's going to get blown out. Auburn is fascinating, Kelly. They either destroy you or they kind of lose. Like, there's no middle ground. They either win by 20 or more. I think they're going to win by 20 or more. And then FAU. Last year, we mentioned them earlier. You and I watched them play in Madison Square Garden, advance to the Final Four. I've got FAU -2.5 against a Northwestern team that I think has overachieved. I think FAU will round into shape, play well in the tournament. Those are my 4 Friday top picks. Do you have any of those same games?
I do not. I am opposite of you, though, on Florida Atlantic, Northwestern. Northwestern, I gave out the money line.
Okay.
I think they win this game outright. I didn't believe that Florida Atlantic even maybe deserved to be in this. Just slightly. I could have flipped a coin and made a decision. Here's what I'm going to tell you about Northwestern. If they get hot from 3, it's going to be a long day for the Owls. I was trying to find some bigger underdogs, but I just didn't want to force it. I will agree with you. Northwestern can be frustrating. That ugly loss, in the Big Ten championship to Wisconsin gives them an entire week's worth of rest here. This is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. They don't turn the ball over. They're super experienced. They play really well together. They're one of the most cohesive teams. I like Chris Collins' squad, so we are opposite there. And then I've got two other underdogs that I am going to parlay together with them. I like Utah State to beat TCU. That is the one Big 12 team I think that actually loses in the first round, not named Texas, which we can get into in a minute now that we know that matchup. Utah State can be very, very frustrating because they don't knock down threes. They're not going to win in a high-scoring game. So we want this game played in like the low 70s, high 60s versus the Horned Frogs, and I think that that's really possible with this defense. TCU, Jamie Dixon, all the credit in the world. I think this is a Mountain West team that people are really overlooking in this one, and that's why we've seen it get bet up all weekend long. And then I know you're on St. Mary's. I'm on Grand Canyon, one of the most experienced teams in the country. This team, Western Athletic Conference, just going to be just cruising along, right? Nation's one of the nation's longest active win streaks. They did lose to Tarleton State and Abilene Christian back in February on the road, but I like this team. I think St. Mary's finally getting the best of Gonzaga. They're really reading their press clippings, thinking this is going to be some, dogfight where I think Grand Canyon is going to surprise a lot of people. And if they don't win outright, I don't think they cover the 5.5, because this team doesn't make their free throws.
Any other games that stand out to you? So I got 4 ones that I like on Thursday, 4 that I like on Friday. Anything else you think people should be aware of as they get ready to sit down on their couch and get gorged by basketball excess?
Yeah, New Mexico Clemson is another interesting one here. I know that a lot of people historically have been down on the Mountain West Conference, and rightfully so. But they made an awesome run here in the Mountain West tournament. I think they carry that over into a Clemson team that should not be seated as high as they are. I was floored. So I love taking the higher seeded teams, laying points against the lower seeded teams. So that is the angle that I'm looking at there with the Lobos. Clemson, nothing really to write home about. I can't say there's anything impressive outside of maybe a squeak of a win here or there. They didn't do anything against Duke outside of lose by 1, just gut-wrenching loss. To turn around and lose to Georgia Tech in double overtime, like, this is just not a consistent team. I think the Lobos get the best of them.
All right, the bets are ready. Where are you watching? Are you going to be in Florida for the tournament this week?
So for the first week, I am going to be at home. I was supposed to be in New York. We are hosting a meet and greet of our own at Wager Talk, and I just said I can't do it, you guys. Like, my liver cannot do it. I do not want to spend 3 days with you heathens. So all of my guys, all of the guys that work for me, friends, are up there, so they're going to have a blast. And then next week, I have to go to Mexico for a birthday party, so I cannot wait to get kicked out of a Mexican sports bar for being a complete obnoxious idiot after having too many margaritas.
That sounds amazing. I'm jealous already. Kelly Stewart, a.k.a. at Kelly in Vegas, go follow her. We hope we have made you some money. The wagers are out there. Fingers crossed. Get the brackets in, get the picks in, and enjoy the games. We'll see you next week. I think, you're be in Mexico, so maybe we won't. We'll have to figure out how to do that.
No, we're definitely going to see you guys next week. I gotta keep a little bit of grip on the stuff. We'll see you next week for sure.